What's up, DAW Nation? My name is Wyatt Troy, and I want to welcome you to episode 4.5 of Behind the DAW. Now, as you notice, this is a 0.5 episode, so how does this differ from the normal episodes? So, usually on Behind the DAW, we interview music producers, artists, music industry experts on an emotional, philosophical, and artistic level. You know, we get inside their heads, find out what really worked for their musical journey, and we bring it back to you. So, with the 0.5 episodes, what they are is we take the audio from our YouTube series in the DAW. We take it, we strip the audio out of it, we put it in a podcast form so you can listen to it on the go, get that perfect combination of technical and emotional knowledge. And it's been a massive success. And by the way, if you can hear my laptop off to the side, I'm actually exporting some stuff from Photoshop. So if you can hear that, very, very sorry. Also, my throat really hurts because I just ate some popcorn before recording this. Completely bad idea. Never gonna do that again. Nonetheless, this episode is with Diamond Eyes. Diamond Eyes is a brother, Joshua Marment, incredible guy. We just did the Behind the DAW episode with him on episode 4. If you haven't checked that out, I highly encourage you to go and check that out. He really opens up. It's incredible. In this episode, we're going to talk about how he has extremely budget equipment, but gets amazing results on it, especially his vocal processing. I'm not joking when I say he's one of the most amazing vocalists in the world. And he has like $100 mic, but he sounds like he has a $10,000 mic. He takes Fireflies by Owl City, and that's what the main lead is in the song. It's incredible. It absolutely blew my mind, blew Adam's mind. So there's a lot of other things inside of here, mixing tips, sound design tips, so on and so forth. Hold on, I'm getting a call. It's from Salt Lake City. Do I take it? I'm going to take it. Hello?
Is this his parent or guardian?
Yes.
Great. This call may be recorded for quality assurance. Mark your baby's 1-year birthday by letting them dive into their first birthday cake. Would you like me to repeat that number?
110%. I do not want you to repeat it.
Okay. Now, we need to be sure all of your contact information is up to date.
All right, I'm bored. Sorry about that, DAW Nation. I guess that was really, really important because I had to do with my son's insurance. But nonetheless, so if you're really enjoying this episode or any episode in general, please feel free to comment down in the comments. It really, really helps us out to know what you think of the episode, what we can do better, what we can enhance, what we can dehance, we can get rid of, you know what I'm saying. And also there's several links in the description of this episode. There's one for the Patreon. There's one for suggestions about artists and what songs you want people to dissect. Go ahead and click on those. It will direct you to the DAW bot that we have set up. Tell him all of your deepest secrets. He will transfer them to me, and we can get you all set up, either with the Patreon or with getting certain artists on or so on and so forth. Also, one more thing. We offer private music production lessons and private social media marketing lessons. For those who don't know, that's what I do for a living, is social media marketing. So if you want those, there is another link in the description. Go ahead and click on that. DAWbot will get you all set up. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the one, the only, Diamond Eyes.
For those of you who don't know who Diamond Eyes is, he is literally, and I truly, sincerely mean this, you are the best male vocalist I've ever heard in my entire life. Hands down, no questions asked.
You're gonna make me blush. Thanks, man. My first tip actually would be make at least 3 backups of everything that you want to keep in this world, especially on the data side of things. I have another backup of my sample library. It's just a little bit out of date, but I was able to put together, the rest of the samples I needed for the project. So yeah.
You have a really good rule of thumb for this multiplier about backups.
Yeah, so it's called the 3-2-1 backup strategy, which I didn't personally invent, but it's it's like the standard approach to backup that most content creators, quote unquote, use. So I did a video on it, but yes, the idea is that it's 3-2-1. So you want 3 copies on at least 2 different mediums, and at least one of those has to be offsite. So for me personally, I have 2 different local backups, but then I also have an additional backup which I take to my parents' house every month or 2, and then I just kind of circle the backups around. My entire livelihood's based on my digital data. So yeah, I personally can't afford to lose anything. It'd be far too stressful.
That's a great method. I've got an external. I've got a drive that doesn't leave anywhere, and then I've got like online backups as well. So truth be told, I could do with a third hardware solution, like you say, again, that you can kind of rotate around.
What digital backups do you use? Do you just use like Dropbox, or what do you do?
Dropbox and OneDrive. They're both terabyte subscriptions. To be honest with you, I haven't used them as much as I should do. My wireless connection isn't the best in my studio, but my wired connection is, but I've been having issues with the Ethernet. Now I've fixed the Ethernet cable, I'm getting like 70 meg download and like 20, 30 up. So I can actually feasibly, maybe leave my laptop on overnight and let it update to my OneDrive or to my Dropbox. Again, it's one of those things that it's in the cloud essentially, or on a server somewhere. So it's one you can kind of call on from anywhere in the world.
So something I want to point out really quick. Every single person we've had on the show has had Ableton and has had some form of cymatics in their session.
Are we going to find cymatics in here? Yep, we are.
Yeah, you can already see a C. Oh, yeah.
Kind of diving in on the technical end first, which is a strange place to start, but it was the first thing that sprung to mind when I first heard your track. How did you do your stereo imaging? One of my favorite things about your track was the stereo imaging. I mean, I suppose that's the nerdy technical part my brain paying attention, but it was absolutely amazing. Yeah. How did that work?
The first part is sample selection. On top of that, your instrument selection. I watched your Trivector interview that you done last. I think you covered it really well, but obviously I'll touch on it again. Picking sounds carefully and picking sounds that complement each other in the first place. If I'd have known that when I started, I'd have been 10 steps ahead already. And so how I kind of went about starting it is just with the synths and the bass and making sure that they complemented each other. Regarding the master chain as well, first I've done some mid-side EQ, but that's really just kind of mainly getting rid of the low end, and anything on the stereo image kind of under around 200 hertz was kind of just cluttering the stereo. So I got rid of that, and then just
some like 200 and below on the sides. That's kind of like your cutoff. I've heard 100 and below, but I kind of feel like that's a little low. I kind of feel like 200 is a little bit more safe.
Yeah, I can't remember what the figure is. I can't remember if it's like 100 hertz or 150 hertz. But the reason I started initially doing it is because I heard that for whatever reason, if I ever get something pressed to vinyl, if there's like too much confusion in the low end, it can make the needle skip on the vinyl on the record player. Again, I don't know how accurate that is or what frequency or how much you need to kind of have cluttered down there. But general rule of thumb, anything above 100 hertz, I usually cut depending on kind of how clean I want the record. But I just felt like that 190 sat well for me. I don't really kind of dial things in by specifics. It's just I'll listen to things, and then when it starts to sound good to my ear, that's when I'll kind of let it be. If that makes sense.
How did this track come together? Did you start off with the melody bit or with the vocal? Or?
I think it started with the piano. And then I started to build like this nice little. So just kind of like eerie.
What piano is that?
That is Alicia's Keys. From the Contact Library. I only kind of heard about Alicia's Keys properly to the point where I was like, I actually would like to buy this plugin. I think when Trevor told me about it from Set the Sky, I loved his kind of like his sound on the piano, and he was like, oh yeah, dude, Alicia's Keys. So then I saw it come on sale on the Black Friday sale a couple years ago, and obviously I grabbed it on there. It's something like £30, so $50. That's the piano, and then there's like I parallel processed reverb on one half and kept it dry on the other, and just a bit of OTT. But yeah, it started mainly with the chord progression. That's usually how I start: chord progression, then build a vibe with like the drums. So yeah, just trying to build almost like a scene, like a video, just trying to really piece the elements together and get a vibe going. So it gives me some inspiration to write the drop and make the build, give it justice, if that makes sense.
Do you see what I'm saying, Adam? Like now seeing Josh in person, in digital person, and then listening to his vocals, is the same guy? Like
I found that with Nolan on the last episode as well. Like I had no idea that was his vocal. It's so different.
Something that I noticed really quick. So with your reverb, is it something pretty common that you do is that you actually don't send it to a return channel? You actually just duplicate it in the chain and have like one fully wet and one fully dry, and then just kind of meld them together? Yeah,
essentially. I mean, sometimes I kind of use these sends. To be honest with you, most of the time I should just delete them because they're just taking up real estate on the screen. Yeah, essentially. Yeah, so this would be like the wet chain, and this would be like the dry chain, and then I can kind of feed how much of said chain I want in the mix of the piano. So if I just wanted it dry, what else I can bring in? And yeah, so I can kind of have more. I feel personally, I just work better with having just little individual elements like that. And then that way, if I want to say sample the reverb from the piano, I can just get rid of the dry. And then yeah, then I can sample the fundamental, like the first chord in the scale with the reverb on, bounce it down, and kind of use it for reverse effects if I want to later on down the line.
Yeah, so on that piano, did you play that in live, or did you say draw it in manually and then offset some of the notes? Because it's really cool that I think quite a lot of people don't realize, where if you're playing a chord, you actually want to offset some of the notes just to make it interesting, for lack of a better word. So yeah, was that recording it in?
Yeah, so this is programmed it, and you hit the nail on the head, because when you play the piano, no one hits every single note at the same time and the same velocity. I mean, looking at it, I didn't get round to it. I completely must have skipped, but I didn't edit the velocity. So editing the velocity would give it an even more, like say, unique perspective. But regarding drawing in the notes, I started block chords that I liked, and then added in little flourishes and in each chord. So you can see like how in the first chord you can see everything's offset, just to give it more of a played in feel. Obviously, it's just super easy to kind of have everything like. By changing the timings, you definitely do give the instrument a realistic and organic, which is super important for a track like this where there's a lot of breathing room.
How did you come up with the chord progression? Was it just, are you super good at music theory and you know exactly that you want to go from this chord to this chord, or were you playing around, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I know all my theory. I've gone to I've got like diplomas and teaching qualifications in music, but I never use it. I'm the complete opposite when it comes to actual writing music. I'm very vibe driven and very emotion driven. Say something's happened in my life and it's really set me in a certain way, I'll sit down and I'll either start playing one of my guitars, or I'll start playing the piano. Or, if I haven't got access to either, I'll sit down and I'll just start vibing something out on Ableton, programming it. And I'll just kind of really write until something resonates with me. I don't necessarily go, from the C sharp, I want to go up into the E or whatever. Say, I want to use the F sharp natural minor scale, or I want to write Lydian mode. I think it's valuable to know theory, just so you kind of get your ear used to it and do have like a palette. But I don't call on the theory side of the palette when I'm writing. I'll just play and I'll know when something fits just because of, experience, if that makes sense.
I'd love to get you guys' opinion on this. I kind of feel like with theory, there's kind of like this happy medium, because there are people who don't know theory and they do great, and that's fantastic. I found that like the theory that I do know has really benefited me and everything, but I kind of feel like there's this point, no longer is that information really useful. It's more so just like topic of conversation when you want to nerd out with somebody. Words that you don't even know how to spell. At that point, it's no longer useful. I mean, do you guys feel the same way?
Yeah, definitely. My very limited understanding of music theory, it feels like learning the basics is good. And then the more you learn, the more you're really just finding technical ways to describe almost anything. Like you can almost drop your fingers on the keyboard and you could describe that in music theory. So yeah, I definitely feel, certainly in electronic music, where also we're quite used to hearing quite simple chords and stuff, like we don't hear the most advanced chords that often. I personally don't think you need to spend like 10 years really mastering music theory, but certainly, yeah, knowing the basics definitely helps.
Pretty much in the same boat is it's all good to have all of the knowledge in a creative sense. What's the knowledge without the use of a good idea? Like the knowledge is almost a way to execute your idea, and you want to be able to execute your idea in the best way possible. But without the knowledge, sometimes you might struggle to make the idea come to life. But without the idea, you get nothing anyway. You'll just have by the book music. I believe it's super important to kind of have a good balance as well.
How do you write vocals? Do you do it purely by ear, or did you do lots of different takes? Or
funnily enough, vocals is my quickest process by far. I will spend most of my time slaving over the mix and making sure there's space for the arrangement, for the vocal arrangement. Vocals, I'm not kidding you, I will sit down. Okay, so say for this track, I made everything basically before I made the vocals. I had a filler track that was just giving me that, an idea of what the vocals will sound like in the track whilst I was making it, and then got rid of the filler, like just the reference track, not reference for any other reason than it was just a placeholder. And then I sat down the next morning, I grabbed my writing book. I had I invested in a nice book that I could open up, and I bought a nice pen that felt good with a bit of weight to it. I sat down and I wrote the lyrics maybe in about, I want to say half an hour. So I wrote all of the lyrics, and everywhere where I wanted to include like a harmony, or any kind of counterpoint or anything regarding arrangement, in about half an hour. And then I bounced the instrumental down of Hold On, opened up a new Ableton project, and I just recorded everything in maybe in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then, yeah, that was pretty much it regarding like placement of audio and like how many takes I kind of use. I usually don't even record for the first kind of 10, 20 minutes. I'll sit there and I'll sing everything that I've written for. And then after that process is done and I feel like I'm confident with the material that I've written, And the melodies, the melodies are all done by ear. I don't sit there and say, this is this chord, so I need to use either the fundamental or the third note in the scale to make sure it works. I feel like I've developed an ear for it now at this point. That's something I always advise, is just being able to, always use your ears. You'll always have your ears, so it's always good to develop them. So from that point onwards, I recorded the layers. I have one main layer that's like my favorite take of, say, the main vocal. And then I will record 2 more layers of the same vocal, but like a new take each time. And I'll record one, hard left, hard right, which is again stereo, which helps with the stereo imaging. And I'll bring them right back in the mix. And then I'll have harmony layers as well. So, and then I'll space them out, maybe, 25 left, 25 right, or 30 respectively. And just depending on how many layers, depending how I place them in the mix. And then, then I kind of bounce them down. I'll run everything through RVox by Waves first, just to kind of help I won't smash them, but I'll make sure that, they're not kind of peaking and they're quite consistent.
So why is RVox different or useful or more important?
In my process, I don't know. It's just simple. Literally, it's one slider. It's almost like an auto vocal compressor / limiter kind of thing. I just bring it down until the vocal sounds consistent, so it reduces my need to compress the compressor later on as much. And it makes it, when I initially put it into the mix, it's already quite level, if that makes sense. So I can already kind of get an idea of how it's going to sit. And then any processing I need to do on top of that, it's just taste, if I want to use some kind of OTT compression to kind of make the highs pop a bit more, or, use some kind of like parallel chain vocal saturation on certain parts to kind of articulate, a build or something. Yeah, so I just kind of use it to level everything out, just to give myself a bit of a break when it comes to bouncing everything down. It's a preference, I guess.
Do you tune your vocal as well, or are you pretty good at singing close enough to the right pitch?
Yeah. So again, if we're having an honest conversation, absolutely. I will tune vocals to a point, but I will never tune vocals if they're out of key. Purely and simply, it just doesn't sound as good. So I will always make sure that I will sing the vocal in key. I'm hitting the notes I need to be hitting, and I'm warmed up first. But for a lot of the stuff I do like to have a very polished approach. So sometimes if I want something that's almost like an unnatural kind of slide up, then I can use post-processing for that, for example. Just a little tightening here and there. Just if, maybe I kind of wobbled a bit and I didn't realize it in the recording, then I'll kind of rein in, the width of the note. But yeah, nothing like drastic. I used to, when I was starting out, I used to auto-tune the living daylights out of my voice, and it was very apparent. But now it's just more refining, just for the genre that I'm in, rather than, a necessity in terms of like my lack of singing capability.
What do you use to tune your vocals?
I use Waves Tune. Have you heard of that one before?
I have. I'm actually surprised. You're actually like the first person that I've heard that actually uses it. Most of the time it's Melodyne, or what's the other one?
There's Nectar 2, which is a little bit cheaper, but it's not as good.
Oh yeah, the Nectar 2 is that pitch, yeah.
Yeah, which is what I use, but it's quite a crude pitch tuning algorithm compared to some of the other ones like Melodyne. I've
tried using Melodyne in the past, and I just find my workflow using Waves Tune is a lot quicker because, one, the UI in the box is smaller on the screen, and I can kind of keep it up, and I can kind of rapidly kind of go through different parts of the track and just check everything's in, and I can do little alignments where I need to. Yeah, so yeah, my preference is, definitely as it stands, Waves Tune. And I know that's an unpopular opinion with a lot of people, I know a lot of people love Melodyne.
That's awesome. I'm actually really happy to hear that you're using Waves Tune, that you actually really enjoy it.
Dude, I love it.
What microphone do you use, sorry? Do you do it all yourself, or do you kind of get a studio or something?
So I've always done vocals myself. And I use the Audio-Technica 2035 condenser mic. This, by all means, it's very budget. I actually have it here.
Pull the sound out of that microphone?
Yeah, that's literally the microphone I use for everything since like 2013. Awesome. Yeah, and it's literally cost me like £120, maybe around that region. And then apart from that, it's just pretty standard setup. It's literally a nice white XLR because it looks pretty clean sometimes. Pop filter, and just I stand literally just recording necessities. There's nothing fancy. I don't have no local booth or hire a studio or Neumann U87 or anything. It's literally just bare basics. When I started recording, I would sit there in my room because it's currently untreated, although I'm working on that. but I'd sit there and I'd clap. And I'd clap all the way around my room until I found a point where there was like minimal echo, or like the least amount of like reverberation. And that's where I track. Yeah. But that's literally it regarding my mic.
That's awesome, dude. I'm really impressed that like, cause you don't even have like a thing that goes around your mic or anything, right? Like you don't have I'm actually like insanely blown away right now that you are getting good of a tone, that full of a sound from a budget microphone and not a lot of acoustic treatment. I'm kind of blown away right now, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think a lot of my workflow regarding music is just how I've been brought up as a person from my parents. That my dad's always been a huge believer in it's not what you don't have, but it's what you have and it's how you use it. So, you know, like I've had this conversation with other up and coming producers and they're like, oh, dude, like, how do you record your vocals and how do you make them sound so big? And it's just like, you just spend time. You just kind of get to grips with what you have, and then you're like, okay, well, I have this microphone so I can make sound, you know, what else can I improve on right now that is within my budget or my skill level? And it's like, well, you know, I can always be working on my voice. That's one. Again, it comes back to the idea versus the knowledge kind of thing, except you could replace the knowledge with financial budget. So long as you've got a good idea and you know how to execute it, it does add to it. Yeah, I'm rocking a mic and a lot of love for music, and that's me.
Tim Ferriss brought this up one time. I think it was Tim Ferriss. Maybe it wasn't. Anyways, so it's the concept that you like, there's these two dimensions that you have. You either have time or you have money. Only the very privileged have both.
If you have money, then you can just go buy the equipment. But if you don't have money, but you have time, then you spend the time learning your own equipment, getting the most potential out of it possible. You know what I mean? Only like, you know, a very small portion of people don't have money or time, which is very, very unfortunate. But, you know, people either have money or they have time or they have both, you know? So it sounds like in your situation, you had time over money.
In fact, another thing I tell people as well is like, I had a friend and he was like, oh, dude, you know, I really want to get a really nice microphone. And he's just kind of saying basically he wanted to spend a lot of money on his recordings. But I think it's something like he had a lot of money and he didn't want to skimp out on treatment, but wanted to buy a nice mic. And I was like, dude, you know, at the end of the day, I think you kind of have to go a bit hand in hand with that. If you want to get the most out of spending like £1,000 on the mic. But I said to him, I go, this microphone, it cost me £120, is on a video game published by EA. So not for 1 second can you sit there and say, I need to have a Neumann U87 or I need some kind of shiny microphone that costs an arm and a leg to get a result. You know, it's literally what you do with what you've got. And that's always like my example that I give to people. You know, you can make things happen, you just have to work for it. And then when you get nice things, then it just, you know, it's even nicer. But, you know, up until that point, that's I believe a lot of the time coming up as a producer, that's what sets you apart from a lot of other people. It's just what you put into it and how much you kind of develop your craft.
It's almost like the headphones thing where you hear that lots of the biggest producers in the world spent the first like 4 or 5 years of their production career using like $40 headphones, but they've just learned how those headphones sound. Even though they're not technically as good as the £400 headphones, they've just really figured out how to use them, basically. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's so true, man.
I definitely connect with you on the songwriting level. I love your lyrics. I feel like they're very well thought out. And so the fact that you said that you wrote these lyrics, you know, basically within a half hour to an hour is incredible to me, because it takes me hours and hours and hours and hours to write anything. And so I want to know more about your songwriting process, like how you come up with ideas, how you find rhymes to those ideas, you know, like that. I'd love to know more about.
Yeah, so essentially, I can tell you some techniques I can use if I kind of hit a brick wall, maybe. That might help. Again, something I was brought up with, my dad always used to say, you know, if you struggle with an idea or you kind of stuck halfway through, grab a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, and then just write down everything on your mind for like 2 minutes solid. Don't even do anything else. Don't, you know, you can blink, breathe, whatever. But 2 minutes, just write everything down that's on your mind regarding like songwriting. So it could be like, I could be sitting there and I could be making a song about orange juice. You know, the word orange comes to my head. So I'll write down the word orange, and then from that, juicy. And then something else will come up and something else will come up. And I'll just make this huge, almost like mind map, spurring from the word orange in the middle. That's a really good way I found of just clearing my mind, or at least kind of like just anything that comes to my head, even if it's subconsciously, just write it down. It could be the weather outside, you know, and then that way I'm just armed with all these different things going on inside my own head that might or maybe not make a connection later on during the line, but it gives me more options to kind of clear my head and give myself some perspective as to where my head is at. So that's number one. As far as software goes and stuff, I bought a subscription to Master Writer a couple of months ago. And if you're stuck with rhymes, it's great because it's now this cloud-based subscription thing, and you log on to Master Writer, and there's like you can access it on your phone, and it gives you like your notes on the left-hand side, so like your songwriting, so all your lyrics that you've written, and then above it there's like rhymes, and then there's like I think it's like different syllable like rhymes you can use, and you type in a word, and it'll give you different ways of approaching it. To be honest with you though, I personally, even though I subscribe to it, I'm about to cancel my subscription purely and simply just that personal preference. It's a great piece of gear, but I literally work best when I just grab my book and I just write essentially how I feel down, but lyrically. I never really sit there and think, how can I rhyme with this? I'll just sit there and keep the song on loop, and I'll just keep writing and sing in melodies. And if something doesn't sound right, I'll scrap it. I think it was Justin Timberlake said, like, whenever he was in the studio, this is years ago that I heard this, but so I'll probably bodge what he said, but if he can't remember it the next day he wakes up, the song isn't worth singing. Like if you sit there and you're just like, crap, what was the melody, what was that again, and what was I singing about? If you can't remember it, then how are you going to expect someone that literally sticks in a pair of headphones and listens to it to remember it? So I don't put too much pressure on myself until I get something that I'm vibing on, and then usually at that point I'll just explode off the edge of it, off the edge, until literally I'll just start steamroll writing everything that comes down into my head. I might have to cross off like 7 lines where I've made like 7 different versions of the second line and the second verse, and be like, no, and I put a little star or an asterisk, and I'll, next page across is like, this is what I want to write instead. But honestly, like the best advice I can give is just really get into your own space and get into your own head. Don't worry about the songwriting process, because at the end of the day, we spent so long as humans developing how to communicate with each other. We already have so much of the knowledge. It's just developing your artistic side of that, your creative side of that. Yeah, I suppose, learning things and using resources can help sometimes, but at least for me, my core as an artist and a songwriter is very much, it's just who I am as a person. I don't sit there and think, how can I improve my rhyming or this, that, and the other. It's just literally, personally, I use it a lot of the time as a form of therapy, if that makes sense. So if how you feel and something's impacted you in a certain way, positive or negative, it's my best way of getting that out of here and bringing that to the forefront. So not only one, is it great because it kind of gives you time to reflect on what's going on, but 2, it's something meaningful, which impacts you in a positive way, and it impacts maybe someone else who's going through something similar. So yeah, that's kind of. I'm sorry if that's not necessarily like like a quick fix or anything, but I'd say channeling into who you are as a person and what you wake up for in the morning, and then kind of literally just putting that on paper. And that kind of, I feel like that's really not only good to develop, but it's very fulfilling as a person.
Definitely. I mean, I feel like that's something that's missing. Certainly, not as much in normal music, quote unquote, but certainly in electronic dance music, it's really easy to fall into the trap of just writing like cliched song, if you know what I mean, almost without a meaning or any purpose. And I feel like it. I mean, people tend to look at lots of EDM and stuff and kind of to think of it as being quite shallow, and I think lots of the times it actually is. So it's certainly like trying to actually write music that means something and has an actual musical message behind it. I think so. You can't really go wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Nail on the head, man. That's great.
Yeah, just a quick question. So I see you've got quite a big stack of layers for the snare. What sort of things are happening over there?
Snares, there's a few layers, maybe yeah, at least 5, we'll say. So snares, okay, right. So I think I made this snare, after watching one of the Silent streams on Twitch, but he kind of just lays a bunch of stuff. I mean, I've always laid stuff up like this anyway, but I think just watching him again just inspired me to just be like, no, this is, rather than find one sample and make it big, I've had some really good results making really good layered snares. So kind of the first layer we've got, I believe, is almost like a clappy sound. I may be wrong there. Yeah, okay. So it's just a really big drum machine clap with some overdrive and some EQ just to kind of bring out some of the characteristics. Yeah, then we're rocking just another clap. Again, just EQ'd off to leave some space for the low end of the body of the snare. The snare here, I think this might be, no, this definitely isn't the main layer. But again, that's nice. I feel like that snare gave it a lot of body, whereas these top two kind of gave it more like presence in the higher registers. This gave it some more hit in the middle. The next one is just, I think it's a transient. No, it's not even that. It's just literally a somatics click. Knocking to the next one. Just literally another layer again. And it's all fairly straightforward. So yeah, just again, that's kind of like the grunt of the sample. And then really, genuinely, it's just for me, I just spend a lot of time. So I'll start to build sounds around it. So I'll kind of find the next sound I want and just bring the volume to nothing and then start to fade it up until I kind of get the sound that I want. So just you start building the layers up. And then obviously then I start processing and stuff. And generally, I don't usually use additive EQ past 6 dB, but I watched an interview with Dave Pensado on Pensado's Place, and he was basically just saying, forget the rules. Sometimes it just sounds good, and you got to go with what sounds good. And if I'd have done that about a year ago, I'd have freaked out and probably slapped myself in the face and said, no EQ above 6 dB. But now looking at it from more just, a creative standpoint, sure, if it sounds good and you can't hear any phase issues, do it. But yeah, past that, it's just some EQ8 with a huge boost and just some highs ducked out of it because there's a lot of, clap samples in there and stuff. Parallel compression, transient master from NI, which, just works well if you just want kind of like a broadband transient shaping tool. As I wanted to obviously use this parallel chain to kind of create almost like a false tail with the reverb. So yeah, so this is obviously the other thing I do that not a lot of people I see do, is make a group, say for the snare, and I have got a dry channel, which obviously has nothing in it, and then a wet channel where it's just essentially a send and return. And then I put like Valhalla through it, and then I'll EQ out the low end. So the snare, obviously wet on its own, is this. Obviously without the EQ. Got a lot of muddiness coming in through the boominess from some of the samples, so I cut that out, and then it blends in. I use it again as a blending tool. So, but yeah, obviously, so I'll do the blending more or less in the mix as I'm kind of working through. I mean, yeah, I just think it's a general rule of thumb, really. You should never really EQ so much isolated unless there's like frequencies you're trying to get rid of. And you should always really try and aim to mix as a whole, and kind of that way, what you're mixing out, kind of you can tell if it affects the whole vibe of the record. Yeah, so that's really my snare layer. It's very basic. Again, sample selection is super important here. Finding samples that just work together. And then yeah, just apart from like some EQ, compression, some reverb, that's really it. But I have digital clip as well here, which I believe maybe is just taming some of the level. Yeah, okay, a soft clipper as well at the end, just to kind of give me some control and some headroom. But yeah, apart from that, that's literally my snare.
Awesome. And do you mix as you go, or do you tend to separate the songwriting and the mixing process?
Bare bones, like arrangement. If I'm just starting an idea with piano or whatever, I won't worry too much about it. Again, I'll make sure that it's the sound is in the ballpark. So if I want, like a really soft piano, I'll probably use Alicia's keys. If I want something more edgy, the Giant by NI is good. By Native Instruments is good as well. Or so picking sounds that you want in the record first. And I won't worry too much about cutting frequencies or sound design. But as far as like, say when I've got the drums together and individual things, I will start mixing from the get-go. Like the snare, I'll make sure all the layers are right and they've got the general vibe right. So I'll probably use some EQ to get rid of some certain frequencies and specific things like the lead and the hook from the record. I'll do a lot of mixing on those because they're more sound design driven rather than like obviously Alicia's Keys is just a piano in contact, so it's already going to sound pretty good, but the lead was kind of made from nothing, so I kind of had to craft that into what I wanted it to sound like in the mix, if that makes sense, quite early on.
I remember when we were doing the pre-interview, you told me about the lead, and that this completely blew me away. I did not see this coming at all. Can you tell us, I know you already told me, but can you tell us about the lead, because it's super cool?
Yeah, absolutely. So the lead is essentially it's a sample from a song. It's from an Al City record, but it's sampled so tight that it's literally just almost the tone of the voice and then heavily processed. So bring the sample out a bit.
Fill the open air and least feel me.
So essentially, but it's it's literally just a sampler and then just really bringing a sample in. But it started from that, just because I was just trying to find a vowel that sounded quite, warm. And then, just really added a bunch of overdrive. And done the same thing with the processing rack. So I've got some saturator here on the dry channel just to boost it, I guess, give it some more harmonic content, probably what I wanted to do. And then separate channel for reverb. The reverb's quite heavy, but it was a stylistic choice because I'm sidechaining quite heavily. I wanted there to be almost like pulsating feeling in the track. So when the track dipped, it didn't kind of lose everything when it came back up. As the loop was quite a big part, I wanted to fill out a lot of the frequency spectrum. So the reverb is very loud on its own. And then just literally some OTT. I got rid of some of the high end a little bit. So I think usually it's on like 10.3 on the high as well. But again, that's subjective. That's just what I felt like it needed for the mix. Some EQ, quite a bit. I mean, after all that, the overdrive and adding all these frequencies, harmonic content to the original sample, there's a lot of unwanted resonant things. Just wanted to kind of give it its own space in the mix. So I kind of cut out and made some room in certain areas for like the synths and accentuated more of like the present highs. After that, it's just really like, there's an auto filter on like the build that's kind of just comes up with it. Again, same thing with some gain as well. Gain's automated, so it's not so present in the build, but it becomes more present. Then after that, it's literally just typical sidechain really. So you end up
is that the format control on Isotope Polyvox oscillator? Is that what I see for the automation as well?
Completely.
That's really cool. I've always thought about doing that, but I've never actually got around to trying it or seen anyone else do that. So
honestly, it's such. I don't think it was even as apparent as I thought it was at the time, but I think it hit when the pitch of the sample went up higher. It started to become more tinny sounding, which you can find a lot when you use samplers and vocals and pitching it. It started to lose a lot of its depth. So all I've done is I just brought the formant filter, and you can do it in Nectar as well, and you can automate obviously the formant. So as it goes up, you can kind of bring some warmth back into the sound, and it's quite a different way of working around it. But so that's just the formant here. Obviously you can hear the reverb tails expand everything. Obviously along with that as well, I do a lot of like volume, like speaker off automation as well. So it cuts the reverb in certain places to allow other things to happen. So it's very, very controlled even though it's super loud. That's the overall lead sound. Really, really cool.
Did you tune the that vocal sample or just do it by ear in terms of playing the notes and stuff?
Yeah. So again, the vocal sample isn't like rooted to like a C. So if I played a C, it transposed to a C. I just found the root note. So essentially it's a D sharp here, and then I just played it in. Just played in what I wanted. So I didn't play it in. I programmed it in as I went along and just kind of found the notes I wanted to make. And it's really simple as that. But one cool thing I will say is, it sounds like it's got a lot of life and a lot of movement in it. And it's because I do something with pitch bend in this section. I do a lot of pitch bend, and I make my own vibrato in the pitch bend for like these kind of leady things. I use the pitch bend to make little vibrato runs as well. And sometimes I'll even do it more progressively. So I kind of start it off, maybe I'll duplicate it, and then here I'll make this ever so slightly more and kind of bring in the vibe. So it kind of sounds like it's being introduced like a singer would sing vibrato with the vibrato technique. But I wanted it to be a bit more nonchalant and a bit more in your face, so I didn't really worry too much about like technicalities there. But so that's the other cool thing I do.
This is super cool because so the first interview that we did today was with Arcane Echo, and so he did something extremely similar to this. So like your lead is basically something that's in sampler, and then you process it and then do some pitch bending to make it super cool. He did the same thing, but with his like his main bass sound. So something that I noticed is, so it's crazy that like you guys did the exact same thing. I like this. Like I've never really thought about doing this. So with the pitch bend on this, I'm assuming, and this was the same for him, this is the pitch bend coming out of the sampler, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Modulation. Okay. So what's the pitch bend? What am I trying to, the range?
I think I set the range.
Yeah. If you go to the modulation or the MIDI tab, one of those two, you can set it.
You don't want to get rid of that. That's 5. Yeah. So that's literally it.
So at max, you're going up, what is 5 semitones? 3 whole steps or down 3 whole steps?
Yeah. I guess it's dependent on the scale, wouldn't it? Like,
all right.
I mean, like a major scale, I'd do like tone, semitone, and that's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I like a major scale.
No, 5 is a perfect fourth. Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, okay, right. I'm with you.
My bad. I didn't realize that there was a lot of pitch modulation going going on. Like, this is super cool. I'm starting to realize that like I've been sleeping on the pitch modulation part, because you're right. There's a lot of life in this, and so I didn't realize it was coming from this. So this is super cool, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, it's not what you have, but what you do with it. There's always another way to make something happen. 9 times out of 10. When I started recording my own voice and started editing my own voice is when I started to kind of hone in on the the sampler pitch bend kind of duo, and just how cool it was that you had complete control over if you want to make vibrato or little bends and little edits. Then yeah, this is a great way of doing it in my opinion. And I feel like it's very handy.
Can we take a listen to the drop just one more time?
Sure, I'll play you in a couple of bars before you get a good vibe.
Question for you, Josh. So,
Absolutely.
So in there, so I guess it's like a mid bass plug or something. The that sound that's going on. What is that?
So that's literally a silence patch that I just made. So this is the sound. So this is the core sound in silence. Okay, and it's literally it's super simple. And it's a combination of square waves and saw waves. So part A is literally just saw waves. The first oscillator A and A2 both use 8 voices with no retriggering.
They're panned in opposite directions. Is that right to create that width?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. So that would be another stereo width tactic as well.
It was like perfectly wide, that synth thing on the sides, and then the vocal stuff sat in the middle, and it all just it was a really nice way to do it.
Good. Oh, thank you very much. I mean that means a lot, because generally, like I always feel like sometimes I don't know if the decision I'm making is the right one, and I really have to really trust my ears. And then there's just the plug-in version of OTT. Don't ask me why. I think I hit Command F and search for OTT, and I must have misclicked, but I was like, it's the same plugin. Who am I to discriminate? Wave Shredder by which is awesome. Clip. I use the chop mode. So if I start by turning these on one by one, just so you can kind of see the train of thought. So OTT, and then Wave Shredder. Just really cuts the sound clean, and I try and get as much juice out of it as possible if I want to use it. Some real basic EQ here as well. So just kind of getting rid of some of the the present frequencies where where the lead needs to sit. Yeah, so that's the EQ, and then should just sausage fat in there as well. Yeah, and that's literally it as far as that. Yeah, so as I made the sound from scratch, I kind of engineered it to fit the lead. If that makes sense. I saved myself a lot of job.
Were there any points in this track that almost like problematic areas, or things that were quite challenging or didn't quite go to plan? The
lead initially, purely and simply because I was too anxious to move too much EQ. I know it sounds silly, but I was still trying to view it as a bog standard instrument, like a piano, that's kind of designed to sound a certain way. So I had a lot of trouble making the lead line fit initially and filling it out. Then I was like, no, literally, I'm crafting this essentially from the ground up. It's a completely different beast now. So I just need to kind of roll with it and let my ears do the work. So the lead definitely was a problem area. And then initially the kicks as well. The kicks were, and this is very backwards, because usually if I'm layering kicks, I will only ever have one with the low end in, if that makes sense. I'll have like a body layer and I'll kind of chop, everything with 100 hertz or 150 or wherever it kind of starts to sound good. But here, literally, there's nothing going on either kick. And they weren't original like that. I had a separate sample and a bunch of layers. And I just added, so I had this sound. And then I had this layer on top at the end. Just to give it, that almost stompy feel. And I didn't even decide to, after I switched the samples out and ended up with these 2 samples, I thought, bugger it, if they sound good as they are, then they sound good. Like, subjectively to me, they sound good, and there's nothing else I can say I do on the matter at that point. And that's really where it comes to just trusting your ears. Sometimes things just sound good. They may not make sense as to why, but I feel like in those kind of situations, it's just good to roll with it. But apart from that, everything else was pretty systematic. The bass sound was just a variant on the synth main patch. The only thing I did differently is I added 7 semitones above to give it that kind of like almost chordal effect. And then, really just cut the low end out of it and just kind of level it off. And, the snares to me, I rolled through them real quick and just added processing where I felt like I needed to beef it as I was mixing the track. Cymbals, really just, best sidechain. They're more of like almost like a white noise in the background of this song, just to kind of give it more presence than anything. Oh, one cool thing actually that the guys from Discord taught me at the start of the year was running a sub through the same group and then cutting all the low end out of it. And then it like almost gives like a sheen of like saturation on the cymbals, which I thought was really cool. And then obviously I saturated it more and, got rid of the super highs.
Or that's really interesting.
Pretty cool,
yeah. Yeah. So like, it's very subtle. And I'm not, to be honest with you, we only talked about it, and I didn't really see it in demonstration, but from what I gathered, you essentially, in the group with the cymbals, you drive the sub quite loud, and then, naturally you start to get a bit of like distortion because things are overdriving, and then you cut the sub out because the sub only has sub frequencies and the hats only have, the high-end frequencies, and then you overdrive it, and then you get this cool like sheen on the cymbals. And other than that, just everything's been run into a drum bus, so these are the drums on our own. But I'd say the only thing I really had problems with mainly was the lead. Everything else was very, very easy to mix, if I'm being completely honest with you. Vocals were quick to write, effects were just placed and they sounded good as they were. Layering, just kind of listen to your ears. It made sure that I was relying purely and simply on what I thought sounded good rather than looking too much at graphs, which is something I've been infamous for in the past.
My final question for you is, if you right now, if you're able to go back in time and you're able to sit with yourself when you first started this session, and you're able to counsel yourself, you're able to to give yourself some advice, you're able to, basically tell the old you some things that could have made this track go easier, or maybe eventually, get to the final result faster or whatever. What would you tell yourself?
That's a good question, honestly. Okay. I would say to myself, looking back now, don't stress yourself out about it. Music that you make will be a reflection of how you are and how creative you are at that time. So if you make sure you put yourself in the best place, mentally, physically, you look after yourself and you be kind to yourself. If you're having a rough time or you're having a good time, make sure you reflect and understand that. Just sit down and just write what sounds good to you. And don't worry, if someone doesn't like it. Just listen to the music and just make what you feel. And I know it's always sound like a very hippie way of looking at it. But at the end of the day, if you're stressed out and you're trying to push that aside, and at the same time something else is happening, and like your whole life starts, you might feel like you start to feel very crowded and very like claustrophobic in your own body. I feel like personally that can be a huge hindrance to the quality of material that you write. So just make sure that you put yourself in a good place and you open yourself up to just make the music you enjoy. So I always feel like that will be your best product. So don't sweat the small stuff and just make music that sounds good to you. That's what I'd probably say.
That's fantastic, dude. Thank you.
Definitely perfect.
We have a standing tradition here on the show where at the very end we ask you, feel free to say no, but also feel free to say yes if you want. Would you like Multiplier and I to give you feedback on this track of what we think or what you could have done different or so on and so forth?
Do you know what? I would be foolish if I said no. As advice and wisdom from other people, so it's always valuable for me. So go for God. If you guys have absolutely anything you want to talk about or critique, then I'm all ears.
Something that I noticed, and so this was something that do you know who AU5 is?
I do, yeah.
Austin Collins, amazing guy, amazing.
That's incredible.
He taught me something with sidechaining, which made sidechaining so much easier. So what you're doing right now is what most of us have done, where it's like, you put a compressor on each track. You had that going back to, like your dummy kick or whatever you had or what have you. So what he told me to do instead, have you ever seen someone do the side chaining but through a return channel?
Oh, I do. Honestly, I do that. Are you going to say where you have an audio channel and a MIDI channel, and then you make the MIDI notes and you send the MIDI through to the audio channel, and then you route every channel that you want to be sidechained into the audio channel?
So that is one way, and that's actually how he does it. Yes.
So I didn't mean to steal your thunder there.
So that's how he does that. So I do mine a bit differently, because you can do that. So like, for example, so for those of you who don't understand what's going on, so basically what AU5 does is he creates a return track. On that return track, he puts volume shaper. He doesn't put a compressor. He puts volume shaper on there. And then he basically, everything he wants to sidechain, he sets his output on each channel that he wants to be sidechained to sends only. And after it's put on to send, you can send that to your send, which she sends to the sidechain, right? And then this is where I get kind of like a little bit confused, because he does the little MIDI thing, right? He has to do like an external instrument, so it tells when the what's called the volume shaper to turn on and turn off, and so on and so forth. So what I do, and this is totally just a little personal preference thing, but I found that it works really, really well for me. So what I do is I do that, except I do it within audio effect rack. So what I do is I create a return channel, I put an audio effect rack on it. Then I create a chain inside of that audio effect rack, and I map the volume to a macro. And then for that macro, I can control the volume as needed, right? And
That's
then
cool.
And what I do is, I actually create in my return channels, I create 3 different ones. And so the top one is that it's a full sidechain. It sidechains all the frequencies. The second one only sidechains the mid and the low frequencies. And then the third one only sidechains the low, right? And then, so what I'll do is I'll go in my arrangement, and I'll actually, of course, I'll have to draw in the automation according to the macro. So I'll be like, all right, kick here, snare here, you know what I mean? Kick is super deep, snare's not as deep, so on and so forth. But what makes it, and at the beginning, that kind of seems like it would take a little bit more energy. But what's really cool for me now with this is that I can instantly be like, okay, I want my bass to be sidechained. Let's send it to return track 1 to see if I want all of the frequencies sidechained. Okay, that sounds good. Let's try or return track 2, where it's not sidechaining the highs, but it's sidechaining the mids and the lows. Okay, I really like that. All right, what about just the low? No, I don't like that one as much. And I can instantly, because it's literally, I'm just like literally churning up the return channel things. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
actually like really, really easy. So that way I don't have to go to each track and put a side chain on. I just created me a template, and then I can literally go in. I can draw. I like drawing in the side chain, to be honest. Actually seeing it visually really helps out. And so just, I don't know. And maybe, I know there's like 16 different ways to sidechain, but I found that, and I really, really liked it. And maybe maybe you like it, maybe you don't. And if you don't, that's okay. I'll be mad for a day, and then I'll let it go. But
yeah, we'll hug it out, and we'll hug it out like bros, man. We'll get past it together.
Other than that, that's really all I got for you. Is just I just feel like all those compressors on there could get tedious, and
of course.
So that's all I got for you. What about you, Multiplier?
Yeah, so kind of scratch my head trying to find almost anything to pick up on. So I don't know if you did it in this track or not, but most people don't realize there's this setting. So you have that sampler lead that you kind of play quite high pitch.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you head to the sampler, I can double check to see if you've got the setting on the highest quality mode. For sample, perfect. Yeah, so you see where it says interpol.
I don't. Am I being hand directly? Oh, there we go. Yeah.
So that is basically the technical term for quality in this context. So sometimes now it's not now the reason why it's set to normal by default is it's quite rare to actually hear a difference, but very, very occasionally when you play like an octave or 2 up from the root note, you will hear a difference between normal and best. So like normally it's absolutely fine, and that's why most people don't tend to adjust it. But if you do sometimes hear like quite a harsh sound coming out of your sampler because you're playing like an octave or 2 up high, it's worth just trying the best interpolation because it uses barely any more CPU. So I personally, for example, set my default sampler to be in best because it is like a tiny amount more CPU. But yeah, it's just a small little thing that, as I say, like the difference is quite rare, but it's one of those things every now and then it can result in a slightly better sound.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you guys so much for giving me some feedback. I genuinely appreciate it.
As far as songwriting, as far as arrangement, as far as production and mixing and mastering, you freaking blew it out of the water, dude. Like, this is an amazing song.
Really.
Thank you ever so much. That means a lot coming from, from a couple of really talented guys like you as well. It's always good to kind of know the people dig it, if that makes sense. I suppose it's a validation, but not in like a selfish way. It's just nice to know.
Hey, DAW Nation, thank you so much for listening to episode 4.5 of Behind the DAW with Diamond Eyes, breaking down his song, Hold On. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, again, make sure to comment down in the comment section, or you can send me an email. You can send me an email at wyatt@behindthedaw.net. That's fine. You can also click on any of the DAWbot links down in the description, and then you can talk to the DAWbot, tell them the suggestions of what you want the next episodes to include. Also, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's SoundCloud or iTunes or Spotify or Deezer or Google Play or some other unknown mystery app that you listen to your podcasts on, I don't judge. Anyways, wherever you're listening to this, go ahead, comment, like, subscribe, follow, repost, whatever is appropriate for the particular platform that you are on right now. And thank you so much for sitting through that insurance call. I thought that was nice and random and very Behind the DAW-ish. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of Behind the DAW. I'll see you next week. Talk soon.